Okay, folks, I think we have everybody back with us tonight, and we have Petter Amundsen joining us from Norway. Hi, Petter. I think everybody's really enjoyed the film, the first film there, and we're going to overlook the fact that you were on your cell phone and driving in Nova Scotia.
Well, you see, I do my own stunts, but we're talking blue screen, of course.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we got a very enthusiastic crowd with us here tonight, and they're anxious to hear a little bit more about what might have happened since the film. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Thank you very much for joining us, by the way, tonight. We really appreciate your support of our society.
And thank you, Doug and Thomas, for making this happen. This is a great moment for us. And this is a first because we have never had the second part shown abroad. It has been shown on television in Norway, and I'm quite excited to know what will happen after you see the second part, after the Q&A session is finished, because that will tell you something about what has happened after the film was produced. But something that did happen after the film was made was that we went to Chester Playhouse with our film in 2013, and we arranged a debut for it, the international debut, and Honorable Denise was there, and I think she's here tonight too. Yeah. So I'm happy to see that our film may have triggered something pushing in the direction of better preservation of the island. So I hope this is something that will continue.
All right. I just want to mention here before we get going, just in the way of a proper introduction, Petter is also the author of Oak Island and the Hidden Codes in Shakespeare. You can get that on Amazon. It's available as an ebook. And he is also the subject and co-author of The Organist. That's another book that's out about Petter's theory. So just to make you aware of those.
I'm sitting translating it. I had to do something just to stay awake. It's 2:13 in the night here, so hopefully it will be launched sometime this fall, and it's exciting to relive what happened 9 years ago as I told this story for the first time to my co-author and had his reactions. And I'm happy to see that 95% or even more still stands, which is comforting.
Okay. We're experiencing just a little bit of difficulty with the sound. You're dropping out at times. Mm-hmm. We're just going to take it out at full screen, and maybe that'll help, I think. And then we'll turn the floor over to you.
Hi. Good to hear you. I hope that you hear me. Reading lips over Skype, I don't think that's not too easy. So my task in this now is to tell the story and make people realize that even if this is a complex story, it may be the key to understanding what has happened on Oak Island. There are so many theories, of course, and there are so many areas that have been launched as possible areas for what happened. We have heard about Egyptians coming over, and we have, of course, the pirates in the other end of the timeline. And my timeline is around 1620. So I say that the door to the Oak Island mining system or vault or whatever you would like to call it was shut in 1628. This is the Jacobean or Elizabethan era, which is stopping with Francis Bacon's death. The Renaissance is dead, literally, and the age of enlightenment has not yet taken over. So we are in some kind of a void that some historians call the age of the Rosicrucians. And I suspect that Francis Bacon was the instigator of the Rosicrucians, and that the most important thing that the Rosicrucians did was to hide something of immense value on Oak Island, and they had to leave traces of what they had done. They couldn't just bury it and throw away the key. They needed to do this in very respectful and responsible way, maybe in the hope that someone in the centuries to come would be able to track it down and take care of it. But I'm not sure. It may be something that was meant to be left there forever, but still they felt that they should honor it by marking the spot somehow. So I'm not sure if this is a treasure that should be found, or if it's a treasure that is better left where it now rests. I'm a firm believer in that there is a treasure, and I'm a firm believer in my theory. This is not something that I do as a prank. This is something that I really believe in, and I also see that people who study it, they become believers too. Even Robert Crumpton, he told me after the Norwegian debut, we were standing in the men's room next to each other, and I asked him, Robert, you know, there are codes in Shakespeare, and he said, of course there are. And his explanation is that Sir Francis Bacon and William Shakespeare, they knew each other, but Sir Francis did not write the plays, but he used the book, the first folio, as a vehicle for hiding the map to this treasure site that you have in your backyard. So my question is, of course, what shall we do? Shall we go for it? Shall we dig the treasure, or shall we investigate further and try to find a balancing point where it's decided that it's very likely that there is a treasure there, but still we haven't tipped over into finding it, because I worry what could happen if the treasure will be found, both for your part of the world, but also for the Middle East, because I, as you know, believe that the treasure is linked to the Roman lootings in the year 70 AD, and I worry for what might happen if original artifacts should surface. What would happen with the delicate balance in Jerusalem? So I think we should be very careful in how to proceed, but I think we shall proceed, and I'm also happy about the current owner's attitude. They seem to be responsible, but I think that the government needs to go hand in hand with them to make sure that they do not ruin things by accident or are too efficient. So have a little bit of patience. That is my advice. I will be happy to answer some questions, because this story is so complex that if I begin to talk, then I would know where to stop. So I think it's vital that you get to watch the part 2, because we have more evidence that is shocking. Actually, it's very simple, and it's impossible to look away from when you have realized its very blatant existence in Stratford, and even Robert is shocked by this. and we also see what is happening on the island. So it's quite interesting. But in the meantime, let me have some questions, please. If there are some.
Thank you. Oops, plenty of volume there. I don't know, this might be a loose fit, and I'm trying to be coherent in expressing this, and it's kind of hard because it just came to me as I was listening to you. But I don't know if you're familiar with a lady called Dr. Carolyn Myss, M-Y-S-S. She's a sort of modern mystic person, and she wrote a book called Anatomy of the Spirit, in which she, as a teacher in, I think it was UCLA, was teaching several of the great mystical traditions which touch in the same ones that you're talking about. She was talking about the Cypriot Sira course, which is exactly where you are, and she was also talking about the 7 Christian sacraments, which of course also tie in with the 7 Galto, you know, the Masonic star as well. And she was also taking the Vedic scriptures with the prime meridian points of the human body. And what she found was that there was a very, very close similarity between these, between the 7 Christian sacraments, between the Vedic scripture meridian points, and between the Jewish mysticism of the Cypriot Sira. And what I'm, I guess, asking you is, do you think that it is possible that, as opposed to being a sort of orthodox idea of a physical treasure contained somewhere within the ground or in some sort of Indiana Jones-esque kind of conquest, that perhaps they could have been alluding to a kind of Gnostic perception of an inner treasure found within the body of the individual seeker? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. I think that the answer is both, but I think the main thing here is the physical treasure, but it leads to an inner treasure because you are encouraged and inspired to seek knowledge on your way. So it's like the story in the Bible of the man who told his sons that there is a treasure in the vineyard, and then they were digging and they didn't find the treasure, but the following year they had a wonderful harvest. So you never know what kind of treasure you will reap, but I think that there is a very real treasure here. And regarding the symbolism of 7, it is a classic number, and I read somewhere that the places on the earth where the Big Dipper, the Great Bear, is visible, then 7 is a sacred number. If you go further south and they cannot see the Big Dipper, then number 7 has no special meaning. And this true 7 stars, the septentrion in Latin, meaning the 7 stars, or the Big Dipper or the Great Bear, Ursa Major, it is the center of the hub of the square and compasses, which is the big stellar map that we are using. So I think that there is so much to gain here on all kinds of levels. So I would not say that you need to choose between them. I think they are united.
Hello, Peter. My name is Danny.
Hi, Dan.
I suspect that the order in which you told the story in the movie to Robert was unlikely the way that you encountered it, and I'm sure that's a very long story. But could you outline for us the chronology of I guess of how you went about finding some of the major clues, like how long ago you started on this, and what was kind of the first piece and the second and the third, I guess, at a very high level?
Sure, it must be, because hours will pass. The first thing I discovered was the Tree of Life. I had bought an A&E video about the Oak Island mystery, and in it there is an interview with Fred Nolan, and he says, as he is known to say, that he is on the finishing stretch now. The treasure is nearly discovered, but he then explains about this cross and its dimensions. And I noticed that the 5 boulders that make up this cross, you do not have a boulder that was visible, at least at the junction of the cross. It was further down the stem. We know that Mr. Nolan dug at the junction and found something that he calls the headstone, but it was not a visible stone, and it's flat. It's not like the others. So I don't know if this is a valid find or what it is, but these 5 cone-shaped boulders, I immediately saw that they could be half of a Tree of Life. But I didn't do anything about it until later stage. Maybe 6 months later, I was working on a project relating to futures markets trading. I was a trader at the CBT and the New York Mercantile Exchange, and I was studying the methods of a man called W.D. Gann, and his methods are supposedly concealed in veiled language in a novel that he wrote in 1927. And in it he mentions Bacon and Shakespeare, and I needed to learn about different cipher systems. And then I did the exercise on Shakespeare's gravestone that is not covered in too much detail in the film, but we touch upon it. And then, of course, the Rosicrucian theme is entering pretty quickly with the 53 and the 106, and I knew that the Rosicrucians were Christian Kabbalists. And then I remember the Tree of Life on Oak Island, and I also remember a theory that Francis Bacon's manuscripts could be buried on Oak Island, which to me sounded far-fetched, to say the least. But when I see that there is something very tangible to me, the cipher solutions that point to a connection between Shakespeare and Bacon and Rosicrucians, and then the Christian Kabbalah, then it becomes more probable, and then one thing leads to another. I start following this trail, and of course, things will be added, not in this idealistic flow that you see in the film, because it has been designed to be very easy to understand for pedagogue. I don't know the English word for it, but pedagogical. I said something called that. But in a way that can be grasped. But my way of discovery has been a little bit back and forth. But the Tree of Life was the very first thing, and then the gravestone cipher. And then, of course, I got the folio. I immediately saw the TWO, went to page 2, found F. Bacon. But it took some time before I noticed the treasure map, because I didn't understand how the connection between the island and Europe could work. So I wasn't happy until I had found the constellations, and so that there is this TT map that can be the treasure map in the sonnets. But the mercy point emerged quite early. But I had the kingdom point, of course, but in my notes I see that I have marked the mercy point and the kingdom, but mercy was, of course, in the middle of the swamp, so I call that out of bounds. So I focused all my attention on the kingdom because it sounded logical. There are things pointing to it, but there was nothing there apart from this flat granite stone that is also there are similar stone found on the Victory Sephira, but it is a kind of an elimination process. So Mercy Point then became the most probable spot for being in the entrance to the vault or the mining system or whatever it is on the island, and it has held its position. Nothing has been taking something away from the Mercy Point, so it's still very strong, and I think that you will agree after seeing part 2 of our film. Yeah.
Good evening, Petter. I had a question. Are you not concerned that if your theory is correct and the manuscript is preserved in mercury, that the drill hole that found the fragment and the traces of mercury might have breached the seal and destroyed what's there?
Oh yes, I'm very much worried about what has happened to it. So if this small piece of paper really came from the manuscripts, then bye manuscripts. So I share your worry, and this is why I think it's important to be careful with this island. This drilling of holes is a very evasive method, I think. So I understand that some holes must be drilled, but well, I think that an archaeologist should be consulted, and as long as the Mercy Point has some merit, and I think it still has, I think that the risk of doing real harm is so big that we need to be careful. If we see that the Mercy Point has nothing to offer, then of course my whole theory will be questioned, and then it's less likely that this has something to do with treasures from Jerusalem, and then, well, maybe drilling of holes is something that you can do, but at this moment in time, I think that damage control is adamant. Yeah.
This is for my twin sister, Petter.
Hi, Petter. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
In the film, it very briefly touches on the suspicion that the swamp is man-made or created in some way. Do you think that strengthens your belief that the Mercy Point is the key point for the treasure? Or have you investigated the theory that that swamp has been created?
Well, there are two ways to look at this. I have long thought that the reason why they chose Oak Island was because of the swamp. And the swamp is shallow, and it would be rather easy to make a kind of a cofferdam inside of the swamp, and you could do the work that you need to do, and when you were finished, you just removed the cofferdam and you knew that it was invisible. If you had to build an artificial swamp, then you wouldn't know if it would fill with water. But there are evidence pointing to the swamp being artificial, and I'm thinking about the tree stumps that were found on the bottom, and they are hardwood, which would not grow in water. So the tree must have had dry conditions at some time, if it is a local tree, if it's not something that was brought with a storm. Of course, I cannot say this, but to me, it doesn't really matter if the swamp is man-made or not, because I would think that the amount of work needed to create an artificial swamp it's dizzying. So I have a hard time believing that it is an artificial swamp, but I notice that many people say it is. So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But the diver who was out into the swamp, he reported that there is something funny going on the bottom there. That it was like standing on a dining room table, he told me. And that's strange, because the type of stones that line the beach there, which I think the swamp is really an old beach. There are these smaller boulders. So unless he was standing on a gigantic flat slab that naturally had been there, well, there's so many things that could be and they could not be. So we need to investigate more. But this thing shall move on slowly, I think, and this will also be in the interest of those who produces television, because if the answer is found immediately, then there will be no more show. So I think everybody would be happy to move slowly, apart from these senior gentlemen who have been working on the island for so many years. I know they would like to know what happened, but for the rest of us, then I think that careful is the word.
I believe Denise has a question for you, Petter.
Hi, Petter. How are you?
Fine.
It's good to talk
Fine.
to you. I just wanted to make a comment, and you can make a comment back, that I've been working with Petter in trying to bring some legislation forward in the province to make sure there's an archaeologist on site and to look at the protection of Oak Island, because presently the way our legislation works in Nova Scotia is that Oak Island is exempt from what we call the Protection in Places Act, which unfortunately means that it goes under the Department of DNR. So it's actually mining, the treasure searching. So therefore there's no protection right now to ensure that any items that are found are handled properly and professionally. So thank you, Petter. Petter's been a great resource in trying to help me get that legislation and get the government to support it. Unfortunately, to date, they haven't supported it, but we're still going forward because, as Petter said, it's a slow progress. Thank you so much, Petter.
Thank you, Denise, for taking my story seriously. And I know it's not easy, because it sounds too fantastic. It's so easy to ridicule someone who believes that Shakespeare is the key to Oak Island. How can that be? But you deserve kudos for your activity here, and I hope that well, if there is no legislation, at least those who do the work on Oak Island, they will make sure that they can say that, oh, look how careful we are, we don't need the legislation, so it will work positively one way or the other. So that's very good. Thank you, Denise. So, people are ready for part two?
I just have one question, Petter. Recently I noticed in the book of Genesis that Jacob had taken the earrings and the gold idols from the people and hid them under an oak tree. And I was blown away that the idea of burying something under an oak tree was as old as the book of Genesis. Then a mutual friend of ours, Peggy, pointed out to me that Francis Bacon supposedly had his hands all over the King James version of the Bible, and that he might have, in fact, been the editor of it. And I was then encouraged to go digging deeper and found that in a Latin text from about 900, it was referred to as a turpin tree and not an oak tree, and then that led to investigating the trees and finding out they are indeed different. Do you think something like that is coincidental, or would it be something to look into more?
That could be a genuine find, my friend, because if you see that there is a variation and that the King James Bible has oak when the original text do not have oak, then it is something that could point in this direction. And regarding Francis Bacon and the King James Version, I totally agree with you. I have discovered some ciphers lately that really makes this case closed to me, because I look upon these codes as tangible evidence, but for some people it's fantasy and my wishful thinking. But I really believe that Francis Bacon was the editor-in-chief of the King James Bible, and that it is related to this great project that is called the Great Instauration. And the word instauration that Bacon chose in 1603, originally it was meant to mean the rebuilding of Solomon's temple. And I don't think that he chose that word by accident. And this happened around 1603, and this is when King James of Scotland ascends the throne of England as well. And with this ascension, also Freemasonry began in England, I believe. And I think Francis Bacon's role in this was pretty obvious, that he was the mastermind behind some of the literary efforts and also this building of the new temple on Oak Island. And then we're talking about the temple in the original sense of the word, the templum, which gave template its meaning. So it's just a geometric layout on the ground, not the edifice built upon it. So to me, Oak Island has a temple, and the edifice is the cabins of the Nolans, but they are not that important. The point is the geometric layout, and I think that if you are right about oak being exclusive for the King James Bible, then it may very well be a clue. I have never heard of it, so it's something that I'm grateful for hearing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Petter, I think that's it for the questions.
Okay. Thank you for asking questions, great questions, and I really hope that you will enjoy part 2. It's not that long, it's 30 minutes, and there is a great revelation in the end, I think. So enjoy. Thank you so much for listening.
You can get some sleep now.
Thank you. I will enjoy that.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.
Yes, it's something like 3 o'clock in the morning over there right now, I believe. So.
It is.
Thanks, Petter.